Welcome back to Simplifying the State. My name is Adam Watson. Today we have a special episode for you where I am interviewing Boris Abadzhyan, a foreign policy specialist running for Missouri House District 99. Abadzhyan has long been interested in politics and has spent the last several years directly getting involved in his local politics. We discussed everything from data centers to gun regulation, as well as how he plans to work within the supermajority in Jefferson City. Before we begin our episode, if you would be so kind as to rate our podcast as well as follow it so you can stay up to date on what's happening in our government. And if you know anyone who may enjoy the podcast, be it a politics nerd like me or just someone who wants to be more informed, please share this show with them. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your campaign is about?
Yeah, so thank you very much, first of all, Adam, for inviting me to your show. I've heard your show as well before, so thank you very much. My name is Boris Abadzhyan. I'm running an upcoming August 4th, 2026 primary election for Missouri's House of Representatives, District 99, which includes Olivet, Ladue, Clayton, and Warson Woods. I was originally born in Eastern Europe in Armenia. I came here 32 years ago this year at the age of 7.5. I went to school. I finished Ladue High School. My master's was in international relations. My bachelor's was in political science with an emphasis in public law. And my associate's was in travel and tourism. I'm running because I believe in the multiculturalism that we have today within our country. That's at stake, and we need strong leadership that understands multiculturalism and sees both sides of the world. And unfortunately, under the current administration, we're losing our allies, and it's people like myself are still promoting that and to ensuring that the international community does not lose, the hope of democracy that the United States always has promoted and helped. So I'm running also because I have lived within the district for the past 23 years. My grandparents moved here in the early 90s, so I practically grew up here for close to 30 years, over 30 years. I love my community, and I want to serve my constituents. I want to serve the people of Missouri that accepted me with open arms, 32 years ago.
So you talked about your education, your degrees are in political science, international relations. So politics has always clearly been your area of interest. What led you to become so interested in politics?
So I come from a very prominent Soviet Armenian family. My family liberated Eastern Europe from Nazi Germany. We played a major role over 100 years. My mom's side from the Russian Empire to the Soviet until today, they're in politics in Armenia. My dad's side worked, in the Ottoman government, the Ottoman Empire. So I have always, heard stories, and seen pictures and I was always fascinated with politics. Obviously, I never wanted to go into politics, but then you just kind of, when you see that there are not many politicians that understand what is happening around the world, that's what made me step into politics. And I've helped a lot of our, former state reps, senators, throughout their campaigns. So I've been in politics and involved in politics for a long time. I have always had passion of history, geography, cultures. So you have to understand all of these things in order for you to understand politics, because whatever happens overseas, it directly affects us. And unfortunately, a lot of our politicians do not understand the concept of foreign policy. So that's what led me to politics, because I'm a public servant. I care for the people because, politicians come and go, people forget them. But as a politician and as a public servant, you have to leave a legacy. You have to leave a mark in order for the future generation to advance, in every single sphere. Education, political movements, mindsets, because that's what globalization is. You pass it down, and that's why we have so much advancement today. It's because of our grandparents, great-grandparents have led us. So that is why I'm building this to pass on the baton to the next generation of, high school students just like yourself who are going to lead Missouri into the right direction and preserve what we have today.
Yeah. So you spoke about, obviously, you have a lot of expertise and interests in foreign policy. How will that help you in the State House?
Because, everything from the gas prices going up, that also affect us from, healthcare, that people have to pay, and we have to, we have to embrace other models as well from the Western democracies, and we should not be afraid to do that. So I am the kind of person that I'm very, I want to help, I want the United States to progress because everything affects us, directly, whatever is happening. So statewide, we need to implement a lot of new ideas that we have never had before.
Yeah. So if elected, I know you have talked about how you, on your website, it talks about how you want to implement, drug reform, you want to implement education reform. What would be your top priority if you're elected?
So the top priority will be, everybody goes through different stages in life, and you cannot judge somebody based on the fact that, they're addicted to drugs. And unfortunately, a lot of our politicians and laws that we had before, they have ruined the lives of many individuals, just like when, marijuana was not illegal back then, now it's legal. But those people that already had convictions, it stayed on their records, it ruined their lives. So I believe that, you have to have reforms in order to help, to invest a lot into ensuring that, people become sober, and promote dialogue, and have services that helps them. Not when you incarcerate somebody, because of drugs, then they come back out and they do the same thing. And we have to work together as a community to ensure that people's lives are not ruined, and just have moral support and with family and friends and everybody within the community. Education is also very important because education is the key to the future. I came here as an immigrant, and when people say you don't have the American dream, yes, you do, because education is the key to the future. And when you have education, you learn. We, as individuals, even though I'm 39, I learn every day from the younger generation to the older generation because that's part of the human lives. We have to invest greatly in education, public education, and we cannot allow politicians to take away fundings for schools and different extracurricular activities that help children develop into becoming prosperous adults.
Yeah. On the subject of drug reform in Missouri, obviously it's not the only one, but the main drug that is causing issues within Missouri is and nationwide are opioids. Republicans are typically adopt a tougher stance on the users of those opioids. So how would you sort of work to implement the reforms that you want while also recognizing that, Republicans have a supermajority in the House and will most likely seek a tougher stance on drug use and, rehab?
So the thing is, right now, as you have stated, that the House and the Senate, the majority are Republicans, and they have done everything within their power to kind of destroy the lives of individuals that, that have used opioids and are using opioids. But the thing is, I must have a strong voice. I do not give up, and I fight for what I believe in, and I have always been that way. I will work with the Republicans to making sure that they understand my point of view. You have to, because especially when you're a minority as a Democrat within the House or the Senate, you have to work in bipartisanship, but you have to somehow sit together and have a one-on-one conversation and to ensure that they understand what is happening. It could happen to their own children as well. Would they want the same laws for their kids? Of course, they would not want their children's lives to be ruined or for them to to have a criminal record because of them using opioids. And I'm sure a lot of them have family members that are using, especially in rural parts of Missouri. The opioid crisis is very high, and that is why we have to work in bipartisanship. And I will build laws to ensure that we have reforms, important reforms, and work with different help centers into ensuring that people have enough resources. And I will help with the funding as well, trying to work in bipartisanship with the other side of the aisle.
Yeah. You had previously mentioned that, education is very important, and it is in District 99. They're the two best school districts in the state, Clayton and Ladue.
Yes, that's it.
If you get to the State House, how will you ensure that not only these schools continue to receive the resources they need, both in funding and just in ensuring that regulations and rules work with them, but also making sure that everyone in Missouri can have access to a good education? Because, public schools in Missouri have, been over the last couple of years have been being defunded. You've seen more rules and regulations that make it harder for teachers to teach. Like, how would you go about that?
So the thing is, I went to school. I went to Ladue High School, and it is true that both Ladue and Clayton are one of the best schools in Missouri. Unfortunately, yes, we have seen that other schools where minorities live, they're deprived of funding, which the Republicans are cutting, and the Democrats are constantly pushing for, reforms to have more funding into public schools. But for me, I will work with school board attendants, different school districts, and that is very important to cooperate with your other colleagues within the house, because it's just like a spider web. You have to work with everybody to ensure that you're on the same page at the end of the day. So for me, I will work very hard into funding education, and of course, unfortunately, teachers are underpaid, and that is unacceptable, because this is the profession that teaches, children to have a bright future, but the people that are teaching, they're being deprived of how much they're being paid. So we have to increase the wage for the teachers, because, teachers spend their own money on school supplies, which I have witnessed that too. When my teachers, at Ladue, they would bring certain stuff because the school could not fund it. So we have to work together. We have to work in bipartisanship. We have to work with school districts, and I will be very active. And I will travel to Ladue, to Clayton, and to other high schools, with my colleagues, seeing what needs to be done to increase, the funding, and what needs to be done to improve the lives of children and teachers into having a prosperous education within the state of Missouri and within our district.
Yeah, schools obviously are going to be in need of more funding, as are all state services. We've seen that state services are in need of more funding. But at the same time, there's this new Republican tax plan to eliminate the income tax, which could see either sales taxes increase, which will have a disproportionate effect on middle and lower class people, while at the same time will probably result in things like education and other state services being cut. So as a state representative, how would you approach this if it were to pass, and how would you possibly prevent it from passing?
So, the different state services that we have, I know that the Republicans are trying to cut the taxes. But when the Republicans want to cut something, that means something is going to increase for your own citizens at the end of the day, so there are pluses and minuses and everything. But when the Republicans are focused on something that is for their own benefit, not the benefit of the people, not the benefit of the hardworking middle class and low income families, so you have to understand that, because they cannot understand the fact that, what the middle class is going. I'm hearing stories too from real lives that people are really struggling, and you have to fight them, and to ensuring, that, like the Republicans, to ensure that they understand that they cannot do this. Because when people are going to reach that point of not being able to pay for their health care. Health care is very important for me as well, because senior care as well, because these are the things that they're trying to cut. But as I've stated in my website that the reason I care for, for healthcare expansion and senior care is because a lot of the younger generation cannot take care of their parents because we're busy with our everyday lives and we need services to help our parents, as they're aging, but they have done everything to cut these services, and we cannot allow that to happen. And for me, I believe that middle class and low income Americans should not pay a lot of taxes, and that should be transferred to the 1%, because they're taking advantage. They have taken advantage of our system and of hardworking Americans and profiting from us, and that is unacceptable. So for me, I will represent everybody with dignity and respect and with equality. I have never, I have seen the Republicans trying to do harm to the people, but at the end of the day, it's going to bite them back. When people are unable to pay for groceries and gas prices and so on and so forth, and yes, so they can tax the rich, not the middle class and the lower income families.
Yeah. I was doing some research into that, and if that were to pass, the sales tax increase that would be seen even in our district, we could see sales tax go up into the high teens compared to about 8 or 9% where it is now. And there are some counties where there are some areas of Missouri which have an even higher sales tax. So that will just, disproportionately affect those lower income groups. One main reason that a lot of people in Missouri support this is, well, it's like a two-part issue for them. The first one is obviously no one likes to pay taxes.
Yes.
I think that no one likes to pay taxes, but
No.
The second part is over the last couple of decades, and this sort of goes back to the Ronald Reagan era, but people have felt as though government can't work effectively and that the government cannot provide what they need. So why should they have to pay money that won't ultimately help them? So how would you sort of address this feeling that I shouldn't have to pay the government money because they don't end up taking care of me? How would you, sort of fight that?
So the thing is, how, we are, for some reason, the government is able to fund foreign wars that are taking place, and fund, sending aid to countries like Argentina, billions of dollars, but you are unable to help your own people, your own communities in your own country, so that is unacceptable. If you are able to provide, aid to other countries and finance wars, then you are able to pay, you are able to help your own people, our own Americans, Missourians. So I do not believe in their lies, that we do not have enough funding. We are one of the most wealthiest countries in the world. We have all of the money, the highest income bracket, compared to certain countries in Western Europe and Eastern Europe and around the world. So we are able to help. I feel like politicians are very greedy sometimes, and they are trying to appease those that are, trying to make a profit, from what is happening. But as I have stated, that being a public servant is to serve the people that are in need, and caring for the people. And you have to travel as a politician, and if I get elected, I will travel to areas of Missouri and not only my district to see what people need, people's opinions, because you may hear that on the media, but when you have that personal one-on-one connection with, you hear different stories, so that is why I believe that, we need to have, we have to tax the rich, not the poor and middle class Americans.
Yeah. I mean, it seems as though Republicans, or at least the state legislature, has been sort of taking the burden off of the higher income brackets and then shifting it on to the lower income with the removal of the capital gains tax.
Yes, and I know
year.
a lot of. I'm so sorry, but yes, and as
Yeah,
I know some some workers that work in the home care industry. You know what I mean? They wrote to me and they're like, Boris, we work this much. Let's say they make $70,000 or something, but they never they for this year, many of them did not receive the tax return that they have always gotten. It was lower. They had to give it back. So we're seeing this, how the Republicans are manipulating the system. They're manipulating the minds of Americans that, oh, we're going to help you, with the biggest tax return that you have ever seen. But when I meet people, because I'm very active in the immigrant and non-immigrant communities, and mainly immigrants are the ones that take care of the elderly, you know what I mean? They go to the home care services and take care of the elderly. And I hear that same story that they did not get their full refund. It was just like they had to give back. And that's why a lot of Americans are losing the motivation to work and, to hold a job, because you have to have one job or two jobs or three jobs in order to, one job cannot get you through right now for many people. So a lot of people have three jobs. And still, we're putting so much money into the system, into the taxes, but people are not getting it back. And it's going to the 1%. And the Republicans think that the people are blind. People are not blind. This is no longer the same. You cannot lie to the people. After Trump came into power, we have seen the lies and how they deceive the people. And Americans have become much more smarter, and to understanding that it is not true what the state legislators, especially Republicans in Missouri, as House or the Senate or Congress or the Senate, the lies have to stop. You have to come together and help the people. And that is what I'm going to do to help hardworking Americans. I believe in increasing the living wage. That's part of my strong goal as well, because you cannot survive on the minimum wage anymore. People, are working, as I said, three jobs, but right now, with the inflation, the high inflation and the prices of groceries going up and the gas prices, people are not able to even go to work, because whenever they travel, they have to spend that money on gas. And then what's the point of them working? So we have to work together into ensuring that the middle and low-income families have everything they need, and that their tax returns, what they have worked for, is refunded to them at the end of the year.
Yeah. That actually is a good segue, the living wage thing. So a little bit ago, the Missourians passed the ballot measure to increase the state minimum wage. Missourians passed the ballot measure to legalize abortion in Missouri. And then the state legislature are now trying to put abortion back on the ballot, and are using some confusing language. And then now they're also trying to make it harder to put these constitutional amendments or these ballot measures onto the ballot. So it feels like the legislature is both not responding to the will of the people and what they are asking for, and then they are simultaneously making it harder for them to express what they want and what they need, and to tell them what is going to work for them. So how would you sort of address this disconnect, is what I'd call it, from the people that is seen in Jefferson City?
So I have always been a very big supporter of women's rights, reproductive rights, and I strongly believe that, you cannot tell a woman or any individual what to do with their own bodies. Politicians should not interfere with people's personal bodies. You know what I mean? Lives.
Yeah.
We're all responsible adults. And I believe that, I'm a Christian, but I do not enforce my ideologies just like the Republicans are doing as well right now, with banning abortion. No, you cannot allow that to happen. It's a person's choice to do that. And for me, I have always supported, organizations like Planned Parenthood, as well as organizations that support abortion, because women's rights are being destroyed by the Republicans. And I will fight with my fellow Democrats in the House to ensure that we continue to fight until we have our voices heard. We will be loud and clear. I will be loud and clear into ensuring that the Republicans, that we have not forgotten women's rights or reproductive rights, because we are all equal citizens under the Constitution of the United States. And by them doing that, that infringes the rights of Americans. It's a human right to do whatever they want, or whatever an individual wants. Going to the increase of living wage, I know that they have, blocked certain stuff. They don't want to see it, but then let them go into the shoes of many Americans, that that are struggling right now. So I will push for it very hard, and I will make sure that they hear me loud and clear in Jefferson City. And I will I will try, you just have to sit down with them and give them, give them something and to say, like you have to give them your mindset, and you have to teach them that, at the end of the day, there are people in rural Missouri that they represent, that are struggling, and they do need an increase in living wage. And a lot of people are in the need of having an abortion, because of different circumstances. So you have to just somehow get it into their heads, but it is very hard to work with them. I've heard with a lot of the state reps that are serving there that it's very hard to work with the Republicans and the GOP in general. But the thing is, at the end of the day, it's going to come and bite them because they're ruining the lives of Americans. And, um, in the near future, once they're done with their political career, let's say in 20, 30 years, their kids might be in the same situation, but they will judge them for the mistakes of their parents or grandparents who have passed legislations to ban abortion and to ban the increase of living wage. So we have to work together, and that is why we'll have town hall meetings, in every single area, Olivet, Ladue, Clayton, Western Woods, to ensure that I hear the voice of my fellow constituents, and that is very important. And I will not vote on any issue unless the majority of the district agrees with me, and we come to terms of understanding, because that's how leadership works, to understand everybody. And everybody is equal within the district as well. I understand that people have different social, statuses within the district, but when we're living together, we need to understand one another into improving and making our district a prosperous place to live.
Right. Yeah. Another sort of aspect I think that is interesting, especially in our state, you've been endorsed by Moms Demand Action, a prominent gun, prominent gun reform group. Especially now in the United States, I feel like gun regulation is something that's becoming more and more popular given the amount of shootings we've been seeing, especially in schools. I know that that is a concern for high schoolers. I mean, at our school, we have had to install a giant intruder system that we unfortunately have to have because of how common situations like this are. And in your website, you have talked about how you want meaningful gun reform. How will you sort of seek that out, again, while navigating the issues that are present with a Republican supermajority who are obviously much more lenient on gun regulation?
So the thing is, when seeing all the gun, shootings at schools, it breaks my heart. It truly does, because when I went to school, I never had to face that back then. You went to school to learn and that was a safe haven where my mom did not have to worry about me being hurt, and I strongly support gun regulations because, you cannot give a gun to every single individual. And unfortunately, we have become a nation that whenever something happens, you have to have a gun to protect yourself. And that is not right. There are other means to protect yourself, such as having law enforcement officers that are there to protect you. That's what our taxpayer money is going to. That's what we're putting in. But I have seen, and children, a school is a place where you're supposed to go and learn, and have education. Violence has no place within the United States. And that is why I have always, I have supported organizations such as Demand Action, because these are the people that went through so much suffering of seeing their kids die from gun violence. But at the end of the day, we have law enforcement officers that are there to protect us. So I will work hard in Jeff City with my fellow Democrats into ensuring that, we have tougher regulations on who can obtain guns. Some people, may have mental issues and they can just go buy a gun. And then they come and shoot, just like what we have seen in, Columbine and other, shootings that took place in the past. And we just have to put an end to it, end to gun violence. And we have to have tougher laws and put regulations on stores that are selling guns. And they have to run background checks. You cannot just come in and buy a gun like they're doing right now. But they also have to check the mental status of the individual as well before you give it to them. But something that can harm other individuals, especially children, that is unacceptable.
Yeah, I know many people in Clayton, District 99, especially those who um, have been seeing all these shootings, appreciate that um, sentiment about we need to make sure that students can go to school, and
Yes,
we need to make sure that they can not feel as though their life is going to be threatened
uh,
because of a lack of government action to regulate deadly. Um,
that is why we as a community, if the state cannot provide something, then the district can be more unified together. So that is why my concept has been, if the Republicans don't want to hear that, but the district and the majority of the population of the district that support ending gun violence, we have to work together and build a coalition into ensuring that, we have gun regulations, stricter laws that people can, obtain guns. And I want children to feel safe to going to school, regardless of what age, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And for parents not to experience the pain and suffering of losing a child. And, I will stand with my community and to making sure that there are tougher regulations to obtaining guns.
yeah. Gun regulation is a big thing that younger people are focused on. Another thing that young people are focused on, and I think that as people learn about it, they become more concerned about our data centers. And I mean, there has been there's the new data center that's going to be built in the Armory in St. Louis. There have been numerous actions in the surrounding area and the county to build data centers. The legislature hasn't seemed interested in regulating where this is built. And as we know, when data centers are constructed, there is a big concern about how much energy they will end up using, how much water they'll end up using, noise pollution, just pollution in general. If you get to Jefferson City, what would you sort of do to combat people's concerns about data centers? And would you possibly seek to regulate them?
Are you talking about the AI data centers that
Yes,
they're going to?
AI
Okay.
data
Okay.
centers. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I will make sure that if there's something that needs to be built within our district, you have to have the consent of your constituents, and data centers, yes, they do consume a lot of energy, and the energy prices will go up for if you build them within the district. Energy, like, the water, how much you pay for the water, it will increase as well. So you have to, control. So I believe that data centers should be built not within the premises of where people live, far away, and in areas where those data centers are built, that the the owners of those data centers or the CEOs are responsible for paying for the energy consumption and the water consumption of those centers, but not the public, not the citizen, because Americans are already going through hardships. So we have seen that China, for example, has been building data centers inside the sea, but then those data centers are damaging to the ecosystem of your surrounding oceans. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The marine life. So for me, um, I would not support building data centers that would damage the ecology or the environment of the 99th district.
Yeah. Um, Recently, the state legislature has pushed through a new map for Missouri's congressional districts. These are the federal congressional districts. And then the Missouri Supreme Court ruled that they will be allowed to use those maps for the 2026 midterms. Additionally, if you look at the composition of the state legislature, it is very heavy Republican. They have supermajorities. Yet, when you look at how people vote in Missouri, it's clear that the split is much closer than it would seem in the legislature. So how would you work to combat this gerrymandering that we are seeing going on in Missouri, both at the state level and at the federal level?
Well, first of all, with the congressional redistricting, we have seen that within our state, within the state, Missouri's houses as well in the past, how they redistricted to benefit their own interests. I support Democratic districts because I'm a strong Democrat, and the Republicans, have that supermajority in the House and the Senate and the Missouri Supreme Court when they said that they can. That is unacceptable. They're out of touch with their constituents, the people of Missouri, that do not support that. You know what I mean? Especially in strong Democratic strongholds such as St. Louis, Columbia, and Kansas City. These are the three strongholds of the Democratic Party. But they are doing everything within their power to, dismantle the democracy, the voice of the American people by redistricting. We have seen that in Tennessee. You have seen what has happened a few days ago when they dismantled the last Democratic stronghold within the congressional district, but the thing is, Missouri, Missourians are very bright. And I strongly believe that we have to, as Democrats, fight day and night into ensuring that nobody can disrupt the democratic values and principles, of our constituents. There is a reason, when they do this, to divide areas where minorities live, or, people of color, or, immigrants, into these are the areas where they're focused on to dismantling, so they have their own purpose to control the majority of the Congress. We need to ensure that we have equal representation in both the House and the Senate. And I hope that in the coming election, Democrats will flip the seats, of Republicans and held seats, because they're trying to dismantle the last concept of our democracy, and that is the voting rights of Americans. And that is why I will work with my colleagues in Jeff City into ensuring that the Republicans hear our voice loud and clear, that they cannot do anything to destroy the spirit of the American people and Missourians, because we are equal, as I said, under the Constitution. We have equal voices, and our voices must be heard. Missouri was a Democratic state when I came to the United States in the 1994. I remember Governor Holden, when I was studying at Webster, he was a lecturer there. So we had a Democratic House and Senate, majority, but nothing is forever. And I believe that we will win these coming elections if we work hard as Democrats into winning and flipping Republican seats into becoming Democratic.
Lastly, our current state rep, Ian Mackey, is retiring, so his will be an open seat. It is a somewhat crowded primary. You have yourself and then 3 other candidates. What do you think distinguishes yourself from these other candidates? Not in like this candidate is bad for this reason, but what do you think you would bring to Jefferson City that maybe the other candidates could not?
So for me, this is the 5th time that I'm running for election. The first time was in 2018 and 2020. It was the 71st district. Then when they redistricted, it was I ran against Ian Mackey. It's part of democracy. You don't have any bad intentions, just to have your voice heard, but I ran in 2022 and 2024 for the 9th district. But I knew that it was not an open seat, and when it's not an open seat, it's hard to win the election. But I ran to get my name out there for people to get to know me, and that is why now, since it's an open seat, I can run, and there are chances that I may win the election, because I have been very active within our community. For me, what makes me different is I believe that every candidate is unique in their own way. But for me, I see both sides of the world. I was born in Europe. I grew up here. I travel a lot, and I support the concept of multiculturalism. And the 99th district is very multicultural, especially Olivet, where you have every single ethnicity, religion, race living side by side in peace and harmony. And I'm multilingual. I speak 3 languages fluently, and I believe that my educational background in foreign policy and my expertise in foreign policy, because I do a lot of work in foreign policy as well, it can bring the state and district in unity, as one. So that is why I believe that I understand people. I care about my community. I care about my district. I have had many opportunities to leave. I had wonderful positions offered, outside, in other states, especially in DC and in Europe. But for me, when you care for your community, no money, nothing can buy the love for the area where you live, And I want to give back to Missourians. I'm grateful to this beautiful state, to the beautiful people of Missouri for accepting me with open arms 32. I want to give back, and that is by serving the people of Missouri, giving my knowledge and expertise into ensuring that our diverse and multicultural community thrives and is not harmed or is not in danger of, losing a sense of, hope or those kinds of things.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I wish you luck in your election. And thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you.